Let's discuss the terms left, right, and binary and see what they mean at all. We're going to be talking about politics today, not about gender identity, though the discussion of binary will obviously lend itself to that in the future. First, let's talk about left and right. Left and right find their origins in the French Revolution. Left wing, right wing. What has wings? Palaces have wings. Theaters have wings. Well, it turns out that in the wake of the French Revolution, when the three estates assembled in the National Assembly, the revolutionaries sat on the left, the monarchists sat on the right, and ever since then we have associated leftism with revolution and rightism with preservation of the old order. In some ways, then, the term conservative might easily map itself also onto right wing. However, liberal does not necessarily align with left wing. That refers to something else. That refers to the amount of interference you wish to have on the part of the government on your own individual liberty, meaning the right of the individual versus the right of a collective. This came about in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, in which there was a major push for free trade, coming particularly out of Britain, versus all of those economies that wish it to continue to enact protectionist measures. So liberalism first refers to the rights of the individual and the rights of that individual to go where he or she pleases and to trade with whomever he or she pleases. All of these terms will come to mean different things later on, but let's look at the origin of them to see how they evolved. So, left and right begins in the French Revolution, the revolutionaries on the left, the monarchists on the right. Quickly, throughout the 19th century, these terms will come to be associated with different kinds of people. We see that the aristocracy is preserved even as many monarchies fall, though some new ones are also created throughout the 19th century. In the middle of it, we get a guy called Marx, along with another guy called Engels. Marx writes the Communist Manifesto, and writes the Das Kapital, and the two of them together write the Communist Manifesto. We have had extreme examples of left-wing experiments and right-wing experiments, both to the major detriment of humanity as a whole. Those left-wing experiments would be the many failed communist attempts at collectivization. We shall revisit this shortly. Right-wing experiments took quite a different form, for the right would leave the monarchist position and instead become fascist. Today, it is very plain to us to point to right-wing extremism and identify it as wrong. For a whole number of reasons, left-wing extremism seems to get the benefit of the doubt, as if those that had tried these extreme left experiments were simply the wrong actors. If we had the right people in place, it would all work now. But this notion comes out of the same kind of naivete as believing that an ethno-state, a right-dominated nationalism could produce any more fairness, friendly relations, improvements, progress, any of it. Both of these things harm us quite significantly. Now, let's go to the term binary. Binary is something that we all are and all aren't all the time. The easiest binary is exactly that. You are exactly what you are, and you are not exactly what you are not. They're a binary choice. In binary computing, we don't have 1 and 2. We have 0 and 1. Not and is. Well, it turns out that between 0 and 1 exist an infinity of possibilities. Every little decimal that exists that you could just keep cutting till it's smaller and smaller, there is an infinity between 0 and 1. Thus, one can exist along a binary and seem to present many more than two options nonetheless. In the United States today, we are trapped in an artificial binary, one that is reinforced by action over and over again, but is nevertheless artificial, which is that our politics reduce to two choices, two parties, the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. What these parties have represented and how much they are associated with left and right, as earlier described, changes throughout time. We can say very clearly no one, or almost no one, in the American right wing is a monarchist. They wish to preserve a certain vision of America that they have, but that America does not have a king. And likewise, those on the left, while today calls for revolution are very strong, for the most part, those in the Democratic Party over the past century have looked towards piecemeal reform and betterment of society through small measures rather than the kind of revolution that tears everything down, like the French Revolution, like the October Revolution in Russia, never mind the rise of the communists in China, but all the more so, let's say, the Cultural Revolution, where in an attempt to even things out, Mao destroyed Chinese society. He destroyed the economy and did tremendous damage to Chinese culture. All of these labels, as they shift, are misused or abused by those that wish to manipulate you, because certain terms have staying power. We can all recognize that Nazism and fascism were bad. Therefore, if the right equals fascist, and I see myself on the left, if I hear right wing, all my alarms go off and I go, fascists! Okay? The fact that these things are constantly moving, however, means that people are conversing or trading in terms that are no longer exactly apt. In the American binary choice, I find myself off of this spectrum. I don't find myself somewhere in between the Democrat and Republican Party. I find myself having a different set of political opinions, some portion of which each party embraces, and a large portion of which neither party embraces. There are many political systems in this world not dominated by a binary. Israel might be a somewhat extreme example of such, in which, if I recall correctly, in the last elections, 39 different parties stood for election. The current coalition made up of 8 parties, which people have said is very far-fetched, as these people belong to completely different ideological camps, represents what the best of what democratic processes can provide, which is a compromise on the most extreme ideological issues of any given party, to focus on those things that will better society as a whole. This is extremely unlikely to occur in the United States, and so long as only 2 parties dominate the system, because of this binary thinking. Back to the original binary, everything that you are and everything that you are not. Once again, I said this is a false choice. No one born in America is forced to be a Democrat or a Republican, or forced to assume that the platforms of any given party are the only ideas out there available to embrace. But the power that each of these parties has keeps Americans locked in this binary choice, and the fatigue they have from the political rhetoric, which is full of lies and manipulations, keeps them in the thinking of, I will continue to vote with the party that I see as more representative, less harmful to me, because I only have two options, so I will choose the lesser of two evils. There are, of course, those that for whom each party represents exactly what they want today. But those are a set of derivative principles very much entwined with this team sports thinking. My team versus your team. In terms of game theory, there's zero-sum politics in which each side is convinced the only option is a win-lose situation. There is no possibility for win-win. Of course, we see many scenarios play out in which there's plenty of lose-lose. So we have to be more imaginative and start to get away from these terms, left and right. Liberal and conservative are fine if we are to return to them their original meanings. Liberal, however, certainly does not mean imposing your set of beliefs on anyone else. And conservative also doesn't mean believing in gun rights with, in the right to bear arms in the most extreme iteration without any possibility of discussion. We will talk at some point about the American reverence for the Constitution and how this is a religious attitude, and how the nature of belief in America is applied in every field of life. Americans have a tremendous reverence for the ability to believe in anything. If you believe in something very strongly, they admire it. And this has done tremendous harm to rational discussion. So, left, right, binaries, a beginning.